It started with 9 gunshots, 9 echoes that shattered a quiet neighborhood in Austin, Texas. March 15, 2023. A normal afternoon until it wasn't. Inside a modest 2-story home, a 16-year-old girl named Brianna Mitchell was found dead in her bedroom. Her mother, Jennifer, was sitting on the floor, covered in blood, the gun beside her. When officers arrived, she didn't resist. She didn't cry. She just said one sentence: "I killed her. She was sleeping with my husband." That's how the headlines told it. A jealous mother, a forbidden affair. But that story wasn't true. What really happened inside that house was something far darker, something that took years to build. A story about control, manipulation, and love twisted into something unrecognizable. A story about a mother who thought she was protecting her home, and a daughter who had been crying for help all along. This is the case of Jennifer and Brianna Mitchell, the case they call the Bird Keeper. Welcome back to True Crime Retold, where we uncover cases that test everything you think you know about human nature. If you find our deep dives as gripping as we do, please take a second to hit like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you never miss a new case. Now, let's get into it. Brianna Mitchell was 8 the first time she brought a broken thing home. A sparrow lay on the concrete behind her school, one wing dragged, still breathing. She wrapped it in her jacket, carried it past the crossing guard, and set it in a shoebox lined with tissues. She fed it water from a bottle cap and sat beside the box until she fell asleep. In the morning, the bird stood. A week later, it flew. Her mother, Jennifer, started calling her "my little bird keeper," and the name stuck. Over the next few years, Brianna rescued more: a grackle with a torn feather, a finch stunned by a window, a dove tangled in fishing line. Each lived in a labeled shoebox on the closet shelf until it could fly. The empty boxes stayed, stacked neatly. When someone asked why she kept them, Brianna said, "Because they mattered too." That tells you almost everything you need to know about her. She was gentle, deliberate, and serious about small things. At home it was just the two of them, a small yellow rental on the south side of Austin. Wind chimes, a cracked driveway, a porch light that flickered when it rained. Jennifer worked as a teacher's aide during the week and took shifts at a grocery store on weekends. She kept receipts in a coffee mug by the sink and stretched meals with rice and canned vegetables. Most nights, she came home after 10, shoes off by the door, hair up, exhaustion written across her face. Even then, she checked on Brianna first. They had routines that made the hard parts bearable. Friday movie nights with microwave popcorn. Laundry folded on the couch while they watched old comedies. A running joke about whose turn it was to fix the squeaky bathroom door that never got fixed. When the power bill was higher than expected, they ate cereal for dinner and called it breakfast night. When Jennifer's back hurt, Brianna heated a towel in the dryer and draped it over her shoulders. When Brianna brought home a report card with mostly A's and 1 B, Jennifer taped it to the fridge anyway. The house smelled like fabric softener and coffee. It sounded like 2 people trying. Brianna's teachers described her as quiet but kind. She volunteered to stack chairs, helped classmates who fell behind, and drew birds in the margins of her notebooks. At 12, she started volunteering at the animal shelter on Saturdays, walking dogs and washing bowls. She told anyone who asked that she wanted to be a veterinarian. She wasn't loud about her dreams, she just moved toward them in small ways. Jennifer talked about her daughter the way people talk about good weather after a long storm, with relief, with gratitude. She'd say, "She's a good kid, I just don't want to mess this up." That fear sat under everything. She had been doing life alone for a long time, running on coffee, adrenaline, and lists taped to the fridge. She missed adult conversation. She missed quiet that wasn't empty. She missed being looked at like a woman, not just a mother. But she didn't say that out loud. What she said was simpler. She wanted stability. She wanted Brianna to have what she didn't: predictable dinners, working appliances, someone to call when the car wouldn't start. She told a coworker, half joking, that she didn't need roses, just a second set of hands. The truth is, Jennifer was good at surviving. She cut coupons, bought secondhand, and clocked extra hours when someone called in sick. She learned which aisle of the discount store had clearance school supplies and which cashier ignored the one per customer sign. But survival leaves marks. Late nights turned into short tempers. Worry turned into staring at the ceiling at 2 a.m. and doing math that never added up. On Sunday afternoons, when the neighborhood was quiet and the laundry was done, the house felt too still. That's when the longing was loudest. Even then, the center held. Jennifer and Brianna had a rhythm. Homework at the dining table, a pot of spaghetti that lasted 3 days, the sound of the dryer door clicking shut, Brianna laughing at videos on her phone, then handing it to her mom so she wouldn't miss the good part. When a neighbor's cat had kittens under the porch, they left out water and a towel. When a storm knocked out the power, they lit candles and told each other the best and worst parts of their week. They didn't have much, but they were a team. If you're wondering what Brianna looked like at 12, picture a kid who hadn't decided to be cynical yet. Hair pulled back when she worked at the shelter, chipped nail polish, a backpack too heavy for her frame. She wasn't the loudest voice in any room, but people listened when she spoke. She kept her drawings in a folder under her bed and her rescue supplies, gauze, droppers, tape, in a shoebox labeled Kit. She was the kind of kid who noticed a limping bird on a busy sidewalk and stopped traffic with her hands to pick it up. Most stories like this open with danger. This one doesn't. It opens with safety. Not the kind sold in commercials, just the small safety of knowing who locks the door at night and where the extra blanket is and how your mother's voice sounds when she says your name from down the hall. That's important to remember later when people ask how everything went so wrong. There were no headlines here yet, no villains, no courtrooms, just an overworked mother and a careful girl in a little yellow house, doing the best they could. Every true crime story has a moment you want to rewind to. This is that moment. The house is quiet. The fridge hums. A rescued bird beats its wings against cardboard and wins. Jennifer stands in the doorway at bedtime and says, "You're my whole world, bird keeper." And Brianna rolls her eyes and smiles because moms say things like that. Then the light clicks off. If you freeze the frame here, you can almost convince yourself it will stay like this, that the boxes in the closet will only ever hold feathers and tissue paper, that the next few years will be uncomplicated. Grades, sports, sleepovers, a driver's permit, a part-time job at the shelter. But that isn't the story you came for. What you need to know now is simple. Before anything became twisted, before anyone lied, before a single message was sent or read, there was a girl who saved broken birds and a mother who would have done anything for her. The rest of this story is the slow erasing of that truth. And the reason it hurts to hear is because it starts from a place that felt safe. Before we continue, I just want to say, if you're still here listening to this story, thank you. This is a new channel, and honestly, every view, every like, every subscription means the world. It tells me these stories matter to you the way they matter to me. So if you're enjoying this, hit that subscribe button. It really does help. All right, let's get back to it. In November of 2018, Jennifer Mitchell was invited to a charity dinner for a children's hospital. She didn't want to go. She didn't own anything fancy, didn't have time for small talk, and hated being away from Brianna on weekends. But her principal had bought a table and asked the staff to fill the seats, so she went. That night changed everything. David Mitchell was sitting 2 seats away, tall, early 40s, expensive watch, calm voice. He said he owned a construction company that specialized in home renovations. He told funny stories about clients, complimented the teachers for their work, and listened in a way Jennifer wasn't used to. When he asked if she wanted another glass of wine, she said yes before thinking. They talked until the event ended. He walked her to her car, asked for her number, and told her she deserved something better than tired nights and bills. For the first time in years, she didn't feel invisible. David started calling every day. He sent good morning texts, asked about Brianna, told her she was beautiful. He was generous, flowers delivered to the school, dinner reservations at restaurants she'd never afford. Jennifer told her coworker, "He makes life feel lighter." At first, she kept him separate from home. She didn't want to confuse Brianna, but the more time they spent together, the harder it became to keep things apart. When David asked to meet her daughter, she hesitated, then agreed. He came over on a Sunday afternoon with a bouquet for Jennifer and a gift bag for Brianna. Inside was a sketch set and a note that said, "For the bird keeper. Every artist needs the right tools." Brianna smiled shyly and thanked him. Jennifer saw kindness. Brianna saw someone trying too hard but polite enough to go along with it. David knew how to make people feel seen. He told Jennifer she worked too much. He told Brianna she was mature for her age. He took them to parks, fixed the leaky faucet, bought takeout on nights Jennifer was too tired to cook. He became part of their routines so smoothly it felt natural. By spring, Jennifer's friends noticed a change. She looked rested. She laughed more. When they asked about David, she said, "He's the answer to my prayers." They got engaged in May and married that July in a small backyard ceremony. Brianna wore a blue dress and smiled for pictures because her mom asked her to. She was 12, old enough to sense change, too young to name the unease under it. After the wedding, David moved into their yellow house. Within a few months, he suggested they buy a bigger one. He said Brianna deserved her own space and a nicer neighborhood. Jennifer was hesitant, but he handled everything: down payment, mortgage, moving truck. She told herself it was love. She didn't see it was control. The new house was quiet, clean, and modern. Jennifer decorated it with thrift store finds. David handled the bills, insisting she quit her second job. "You don't need to run yourself ragged anymore," he said. "Let me take care of you." It sounded like kindness. It was dependency. Brianna adjusted quickly. She liked the bigger room and the park nearby. David drove her to school when Jennifer worked late, helped with homework, and cheered at volleyball games. Teachers called him involved. Jennifer called him perfect. But perfect has edges. He started asking questions that didn't sound like jokes. "Who's that friend you're always texting? Do boys at school bother you?" He made comments Jennifer brushed off. "She's growing up fast, huh?" And sometimes looked at Brianna too long before looking away. There was nothing you could point to, nothing you could prove, just a feeling that passed before it could settle. Jennifer didn't notice. She was busy breathing for the first time in years. The bills were paid. There was food in the fridge. Someone else took out the trash. She didn't have to hold everything together alone anymore. And when David reached for her hand in public, she smiled. When he complimented Brianna's grades, she said, "We're lucky." The first year of marriage looked exactly how she thought love was supposed to look. But David wasn't building a life with them. He was building control. He managed the bank account, handled every decision, and started discouraging Jennifer from going out with coworkers. "You work so hard, you don't need anyone else," he said. She believed him. At home, his presence filled every space. His cologne on the hallway air. His phone always face down on the table. Jennifer still called him the answer to her prayers. And maybe he was, because prayers are just wishes we whisper when no one's listening. And sometimes, the wrong thing answers back. By the end of 2019, the Mitchells were a family in photographs. Smiles, cake, matching sweaters at Christmas. A man, a woman, and a girl who thought she'd never have to fix anything broken again. But inside that beautiful new home, cracks had already formed, and no one, not even Brianna, could see how deep they ran. Quick pause here. I know you're probably deep into this story right now, wondering how it all unfolds, and I appreciate you being here for it. This channel is brand new, so your support, whether it's a like, a comment, or hitting subscribe, actually makes a huge difference. It helps me keep telling these stories. By the time Brianna turned 14, the Mitchell house had gone quiet. Not the peaceful kind of quiet, but the kind that feels like something's being held back. Jennifer was exhausted most nights. David had taken over the finances, insisted she quit her weekend job, told her he wanted her rested. She didn't argue. The money came in on time. The bills got paid, and for the first time in years, she could breathe. But she didn't notice that breathing came with rules. David's version of stability meant control. He handled every decision, what car to buy, what school trips Brianna could attend, even what groceries Jennifer should stop wasting money on. He called it structure. She called it help. At first, Jennifer was grateful. She'd spent years surviving alone. Having someone step in felt like rescue. When he started commenting on how she dressed or how often she saw friends, she mistook it for affection. "You're tired, babe. You don't need people draining you," he'd say, and she'd believe him. Brianna did too, at least for a while. David played the role of stepfather well. He went to her volleyball games, bought her things Jennifer couldn't, talked to her about school. He made her laugh sometimes. He told her she could always talk to him if she ever needed advice. It sounded harmless, but slowly he began to position himself as the one who understood her best. "Your mom just worries too much," he'd say. "She doesn't get what it's like to be your age." When Brianna got her first phone, David was the one who set it up. When she stayed up too late, he told Jennifer to let it go. "She's responsible. You can trust her." Over time, Brianna's laughter around him grew quieter. She stopped bringing friends home. She spent more time in her room, earbuds in, the door half closed. Jennifer assumed it was just teenage mood swings. She didn't see how much David had already inserted himself into every corner of their lives. It began with compliments that sounded parental, but lingered too long. "You look nice, kiddo." Getting so grown up. A hand on the shoulder that didn't move right away. A stare that lasted half a second too long. Brianna didn't know what to do with the discomfort. She started wearing hoodies, even in summer, keeping her hair in her face. The night she told her mother, "Mom, David makes me uncomfortable," Jennifer was folding laundry. David walked in mid-sentence, kissed Jennifer on the temple, and laughed. "Teenagers, huh? I told her to clean her room, and she's been mad ever since." Jennifer smiled weakly. "Honey, he's just trying to help." Brianna didn't bring it up again. The next week, David bought her a necklace and left it on her pillow. "A peace offering," he said. "Don't be mad at me." She said thank you, but didn't wear it. He noticed. He always noticed. David had a way of turning every moment into a lesson, every gesture into something she owed him for. He helped her with homework, listened to her talk about school, and then, later, would use those same details to make her feel guilty for wanting space. "I'm the only one who really listens to you," he'd say. And slowly, that started to sound true. At school, Brianna's grades slipped. Teachers noticed she was distracted. Her best friend Emma said she was quieter. Her boyfriend Tyler said she was distant. When he asked if something was wrong, she said she was just tired. David had told her not to share family problems. "People don't need to know our business," he'd warned. Jennifer saw the change too, but through a mother's lens. She thought Brianna was becoming rebellious, secretive. They started fighting more. "You don't talk to me anymore," Jennifer said once. Brianna replied, "Because you don't listen." Jennifer grounded her for the tone, not realizing what the words meant. Meanwhile, David played the mediator. He comforted Jennifer when she cried, told her parenting teens was hard. Then, in another room, told Brianna her mother was overreacting. "She just doesn't get it," he whispered. "You're not the problem." The distance between mother and daughter grew wider. Jennifer blamed hormones. Brianna blamed herself. David blamed no one. He didn't have to. He'd already won. This is how grooming works. It doesn't start with violence. It starts with trust. A favor here, a compliment there, a child feeling special, a parent feeling grateful. Every boundary moved just a little at a time until no one remembers where it used to be. By the time Brianna turned 15, David had control over both of them. Jennifer depended on him financially and emotionally. Brianna depended on him for approval, and neither realized how trapped they were. If you're watching from the outside, it's easy to say, "Why didn't she tell someone?" But grooming doesn't just silence victims, it convinces them they have no one left to tell. Brianna learned that the hard way. The girl who used to rescue broken birds stopped going outside. She stopped laughing at dinner. She stopped talking to her mom about anything that mattered. And Jennifer, still tired, still trying, thought everything was fine. She thought her family had finally found peace. But peace can look a lot like control when you don't know the difference. By 16, Brianna had changed. Her grades had slipped, she'd quit volleyball, and her clothes had gotten smaller while her attitude got louder. Jennifer chalked it up to teenage rebellion. She told coworkers her daughter was going through a phase. What she didn't say was that the house felt heavier, that she and Brianna fought over everything: bedtime, clothes, curfews, tone. The easy laughter that used to fill the rooms was gone. Now there were slammed doors and long silences. David played the calm one. He never yelled, never scolded. He just watched. When Jennifer complained about Brianna's new behavior, he told her to relax. "She's growing up," he'd say. "You're being too hard on her." When Brianna stormed off, he'd knock on her door later and say, "Your mom means well, she's just stressed." To both of them, he sounded reasonable. To an outsider, he looked like the only stable person in the house. Jennifer's marriage, meanwhile, was unraveling quietly. David had stopped reaching for her in bed months ago. She tried to ignore it at first, told herself he was tired, that all marriages cooled eventually. But when she found him scrolling through his phone late at night, screen turned away from her, she started to wonder. She blamed herself, her body, her age, her exhaustion. She bought new clothes, changed her hair, even joined a gym for a month. Nothing worked. He'd smile, say she was beautiful, then roll over and fall asleep. In moments of weakness, she'd glance at Brianna and feel something ugly stir inside her. Her daughter was young, confident, unburdened by bills or deadlines. She hated herself for the comparison, but it came anyway. Brianna noticed the distance between her parents. She also noticed how David treated her differently, how he complimented her hair, how he laughed at her jokes, how he looked proud when she entered a room. It made her uncomfortable at first, then confused. He told her things she wanted to hear, that she was special, that she was more mature than other girls her age, that he could talk to her in ways he couldn't talk to Jennifer. When Brianna turned 16, he crossed another invisible line. He started texting her directly, jokes, advice, photos of random things during the day. He told her not to tell her mom because she'd make it weird. She didn't see the trap forming, she just saw attention. It was wrong, but it also felt like proof she mattered to someone. Jennifer saw the shift too, but through a distorted lens. Brianna's rebellion grew bolder. She stayed out later, rolled her eyes at everything, pushed boundaries that used to hold. Jennifer didn't see a daughter being manipulated. She saw one turning cruel. When she confronted her, Brianna snapped, "You don't understand anything," and walked away. David stood behind Jennifer, hands on her shoulders, whispering, "Let her go. She'll come around." It was the perfect lie. Jennifer's world shrank even more. David handled all the bills, drove her to work, picked her up, made every decision. When she did spend time alone with Brianna, it always ended in an argument. David made sure of that. He'd drop small comments that kept the tension alive. "You know, she talks about you like you're her enemy." And Jennifer, already insecure, believed him. At school, Brianna was different too. Teachers saw flashes of attitude that hadn't been there before. Emma, her best friend, said she was distracted. Her phone buzzed constantly. But she smiled only sometimes when she looked at it. When asked about her mom, she rolled her eyes and said, She doesn't get me." By the time winter came, Jennifer and Brianna barely spoke. Dinner was quiet. David ate slowly, smiling faintly as they both avoided eye contact. In February, Jennifer noticed Brianna's new perfume. It was expensive, too expensive for a 16-year-old. When she asked about it, Brianna shrugged. "Got it as a gift," Jennifer demanded to know from who. Brianna said, "Why do you care?" and walked off. Later that night, Jennifer told David, "She's hiding something." He sighed. Teenagers always are. He knew exactly what she was hiding. Brianna didn't think of what was happening as wrong. Not at first. David told her it was love, that what they shared was special, that he'd never hurt her. He said Jennifer wouldn't understand, that she was fragile, that she'd fall apart if she ever knew. For a 16-year-old, that kind of guilt works like a lock. She kept the secret. She told herself she wanted it. She told herself it was her choice. But nothing about it was a choice. It was manipulation wearing the mask of affection. Jennifer felt the change but couldn't explain it. She saw her daughter acting distant, secretive, dressing older, arguing more. She saw David's calm detachment and assumed he was disappointed in her. Every time she tried to fix the tension, she made it worse. One night she cried in the bathroom, whispering, "What am I doing wrong?" The answer was nothing. The problem wasn't her parenting. It was the man standing in her kitchen, washing dishes like he owned the world. By the time Brianna turned 17, the house was split in two. Jennifer lived in guilt and confusion, Brianna lived in delusion and secrecy, and David lived in complete control. He was the husband who made breakfast, the stepfather who fixed things, the man who never raised his voice. No one saw the monster because monsters like him don't show their teeth until they're sure no one's watching. The Mitchells looked like a family trying to survive a normal teenage phase. But what was really happening was a slow psychological corrosion, one that would end, like all things built on lies, in fire. By 17, Brianna had convinced herself she was in love. That's how good David was at rewriting reality. He told her that what they had was real, that it didn't matter what anyone else thought, that the world wouldn't understand something pure. He said her mother didn't see him for who he really was, but she did. For a girl still trying to figure out who she was, that kind of attention felt powerful. It made her feel chosen. At school, people noticed she'd changed again. She wore tighter clothes, heavier makeup, and carried herself like someone older. Emma, her best friend, tried to ask what was going on, but Brianna brushed her off. "I'm fine. I'm just growing up." She said it like she believed it. She didn't tell anyone about the secret phone calls or the late-night drives when David said he needed someone to talk to. At home, Jennifer could feel something was wrong but couldn't name it. The tension between her and Brianna had become unbearable. They argued almost every day about chores, about clothes, about the way Brianna spoke to her. Every argument ended the same way, Brianna yelling, Jennifer crying, David stepping in to play peacekeeper. "You both need to calm down," he'd say, as if he wasn't the one setting the fire in the first place. Jennifer's insecurity was eating her alive. David no longer touched her, barely looked at her, and she blamed herself. She'd stand in the mirror before work, staring at wrinkles she hadn't noticed before, running her hands over the softness of her stomach, whispering, "What happened to me?" She tried harder, new makeup, new clothes, romantic dinners, but nothing worked. David's affection had shifted somewhere else, and she didn't know where. Brianna started staying out later. When Jennifer asked where she was going, she'd say, "Emma's," though sometimes Emma hadn't seen her in weeks. When Jennifer pressed, Brianna's temper flared. "You don't trust me," she'd yell. "You never have." David would pull Jennifer aside afterward and whisper, "She's just testing you. Let her be. You'll push her away." He said it with a calm, patient smile that made her feel like the unreasonable one. Behind that calm, David was crafting a story, one where he was the victim. He told Brianna her mother hated him, that she was jealous, that if she ever found out about them, she'd ruin everything. He made Brianna promise to keep their secret. "This is ours," he'd say. "People wouldn't understand." He convinced her to message him from a different phone, to delete conversations, to protect what they had. By then, Brianna didn't feel scared anymore. She felt responsible. She told herself she was helping him, that she was the reason he smiled, that she could fix whatever was wrong in his marriage. She was 16, almost 17, and thought she was making adult choices. But really, she was living inside a lie built by someone who knew exactly which buttons to press. Jennifer noticed the new phone first. When she asked about it, Brianna said it was an old one from a friend. The lie came too easily. That night, Jennifer told David she's hiding something. He nodded, said, "Teenagers always are," and then deleted the messages before going to bed. The fights between mother and daughter grew sharper. Jennifer's voice cracked from shouting, Brianna's from crying. Sometimes Jennifer would apologize in the morning, saying she didn't mean it, that she just wanted to understand. Brianna would shrug, say, "It's fine," and walk away. But it wasn't fine. The resentment was turning into something dangerous. David knew it. He used it. When Jennifer accused him of pulling away, he said, "You're imagining things." When she mentioned how Brianna dressed, he said, "You're overreacting." When she cried, he held her just long enough to keep her quiet. There were moments when Jennifer almost saw it. The way Brianna looked at him when he entered a room. The way he looked back, calm and unreadable. But she pushed the thought away. She couldn't face it. One afternoon, she overheard them laughing in the kitchen. Brianna was showing him something on her phone. Jennifer froze in the hallway. The sound was innocent. A stepfather and a daughter sharing a moment, but something about it made her chest tighten. That night, she dreamed about David whispering to someone in the dark, and she couldn't tell whose name he was saying. By spring, their house was a quiet battlefield. Jennifer and Brianna barely spoke unless they were arguing. David moved through the tension like it was background noise, smiling, calm, untouchable. Then, small things began to unravel. Jennifer found a text on the family laptop that didn't make sense. Half a sentence, a saved draft. "I miss you. When can we?" She asked Brianna about it, and Brianna snatched the computer away, saying it was private. Jennifer's heart sank, but she didn't know why. Later that night, she told David, "She's acting strange." He sighed, rubbed her shoulders, and said, "You need to stop worrying so much. You're going to drive her away." He made it sound like love. That summer, Brianna turned 17. Jennifer baked a cake and tried to make it feel normal. David gave Brianna a silver bracelet. Jennifer noticed it had initials on the inside, DM. She asked about it, and Brianna said it stood for Dream More. Jennifer forced a smile but didn't believe it. That night, she lay awake, staring at the ceiling. She wanted to believe she was overthinking, that she was paranoid, that her family wasn't falling apart. But deep down, she knew something was rotting underneath the surface, and whatever it was starting to pull her daughter further away. By the end of that summer, the lines between love, guilt, and control were gone. Brianna thought she was protecting someone. Jennifer thought she was losing everyone. And David, calm, patient, always composed, had what he wanted. Two women, too blinded by emotion to see who was really in control. By the fall of 2022, the Mitchell home looked normal again from the outside. The grass was cut, the mail brought in on time, and dinner still hit the table at 6. But inside, everything was quietly falling apart. Jennifer and David barely spoke. When they did, it was about small things, bills, schedules, groceries, never about the growing silence between them. Nights ended with the sound of separate doors closing. Jennifer told herself that every marriage hit rough patches. But when she looked at him, she saw nothing left to hold on to. David had become distant and cold, sleeping in the guest room more often than not. Jennifer blamed herself. She bought new clothes, changed her perfume, joined a yoga class. Nothing made a difference. He'd smile politely, call her Han, and change the subject. When she asked if he still loved her, he said, "Of course." Don't be dramatic. The words landed like a door closing. The fights with Brianna grew worse. Jennifer couldn't understand her daughter anymore. She wore short skirts, came home late, and spoke to her with the sharpness of someone older. Every rule turned into a battle. The little girl who once laughed at movie nights now looked at her mother like an enemy. Jennifer tried to reach her, offered dinner together, asked about school, but Brianna rolled her eyes and walked away. When Jennifer tried to take her phone, Brianna snapped, "You don't control me," and locked herself in her room. David, meanwhile, played the voice of reason. "You're too hard on her," he'd say. "She's just a teenager." When Brianna was in trouble, he defended her. When Jennifer cried, he comforted her, telling her she was just tired. He positioned himself as the steady one, the calm in the storm he had created. The more they fought, the more both women relied on him. Jennifer for reassurance, Brianna for validation. It was manipulation disguised as stability. At school, teachers noticed Brianna drifting. She skipped class, turned in assignments late, and avoided friends. Emma tried to talk to her, but Brianna brushed her off. "I'm fine," she said, though her voice lacked conviction. She looked tired all the time, dark circles under her eyes, a smile that never reached her face. Emma didn't know what was going on, but she knew it wasn't just teenage rebellion. At home, Jennifer's isolation deepened. She had stopped seeing friends. Her world had narrowed to work and home, and neither felt safe anymore. The walls of that big, perfect house felt closer every day. She started to notice things she couldn't explain. David's phone face down at dinner, Brianna's quick exits when he entered the room, the way they avoided eye contact when she was around. Sometimes she'd walk into the kitchen and feel like a conversation had just ended. The silence would thicken, and she'd tell herself she was imagining it. She wanted so badly to believe her family was normal that she ignored the signs screaming otherwise. One night, she found Brianna crying in her car outside the house. She knocked on the window, and Brianna wiped her eyes quickly. "I'm fine," she said again. Jennifer reached for her hand, but Brianna pulled away. "You don't get it, Mom." Her voice cracked on the word Mom, like it still mattered, but hurt to say. Jennifer wanted to push, to demand answers, but she didn't. She just stood there and said, "I love you, you know that?" Brianna nodded, started the engine, and drove off. Inside, David was watching a movie. He didn't ask where Brianna went. He didn't look surprised. He just muted the TV and said, "You need to stop hovering. She's going to end up hating you." Jennifer wanted to argue but couldn't find the words. Weeks later, the distance became unbearable. Jennifer checked Brianna's phone while she was asleep. The messages were locked. The history cleared. She told David about it the next morning, and he acted patient, even sympathetic. "Jen, she's 17. You have to trust her. Don't become one of those controlling moms." He kissed her forehead and left for work. She stood there feeling small, like a child being scolded. Brianna, meanwhile, was drowning in guilt. The thrill of what she thought was love had faded. She started to see the manipulation, but by then it was too late. David had convinced her that no one would believe her, that if she spoke up, her mother would hate her. He reminded her how angry Jennifer was lately, how jealous she seemed. "She already thinks you're the problem," he'd whisper. "You don't want to give her a reason to prove it." Brianna believed him. Her world shrank to the size of her room. She stopped drawing, stopped rescuing birds, stopped talking to anyone. Her silence became her shield. But silence has a cost. It eats away at you from the inside. By early 2023, Jennifer was unraveling. Her hair was thinning from stress. She couldn't sleep, and she started missing work. She felt something terrible building, but couldn't see it clearly. David made her feel crazy for asking questions, and Brianna made her feel unwanted for caring. The house that once symbolized stability had become a cage filled with blame. Jennifer spent Valentine's Day alone on the couch. David said he was working late. Brianna said she was at a friend's. Neither came home until after midnight. She sat in the dark living room for hours, a glass of wine untouched beside her, staring at the wall. The quiet was unbearable. When she finally went to bed, she whispered the same words she'd said when Brianna was little. "You're my whole world." But this time it sounded less like love and more like a warning. The next month, everything would break. But before that day, before the gun and the headlines and the photographs, there was still time, barely, for someone to notice. A teacher, a neighbor, a friend, someone who could have asked the right question, seen the right thing. But no one did. By March of 2023, the Mitchell family looked like any other. 3 people under one roof, eating dinner in silence, pretending everything was fine. And that's the danger of pretending. It keeps the truth alive just long enough to destroy everyone who avoids it. March 15th, 2023 began like any other Wednesday. Jennifer woke up early, packed her lunch, and left for work before sunrise. Brianna was still in bed, her door half open, phone glowing beside her. David stood in the kitchen, pouring coffee. He kissed Jennifer on the cheek, told her he'd be on a job site most of the day, and watched her drive away. By now, the 3 of them were strangers living under the same roof. Jennifer spent her days pretending she was fine. Brianna spent hers pretending she wasn't falling apart. And David, as always, managed both stories, keeping one woman hopeless and the other one hooked. At school that day, Brianna was quiet. She didn't eat lunch, ignored texts from Emma, and stared at her notebook like she couldn't focus on a single thought. Teachers assumed she was tired. No one knew she'd spent half the night reading old messages from David, trying to make sense of feelings that no longer made sense at all. At 1:15 p.m., Jennifer's phone buzzed. A message from her principal. The afternoon teacher training was canceled. For the first time in weeks, she'd be home early. She texted David that she'd pick up dinner on the way, but he didn't respond. She didn't think much of it. By 2:30, Jennifer's car pulled into the driveway. The sun was high. David's truck was already there. She figured he must have finished work early, too. When she walked inside, the house was silent. Her purse hit the counter. That's when she noticed it. David's phone, unlocked, face up on the kitchen island. Normally, she wouldn't touch it. But something stopped her. Maybe it was curiosity. Maybe it was months of suspicion finally breaking through denial. She glanced at the screen. A message preview. "I miss you too." The contact name was just the letter B. Her first thought wasn't her daughter. It was another woman. Her stomach twisted with anger and relief, anger that she might finally have proof, relief that it wasn't her fault he'd pulled away. She picked up the phone. The screen stayed open. No password. Just a thread of messages, hundreds of them. She scrolled. Words blurred. "Can't wait to see you. You're perfect. Delete this." Each line made less sense than the last. Then she saw the photos. Blurry. Coded. Wrong. And the name above them wasn't another woman's. It was Brianna's. Her world went silent. She scrolled faster, hands shaking so hard she almost dropped the phone. Timestamps, emojis, private jokes. Every message designed to look mutual, as if her daughter had wanted this, as if her daughter was the one who'd done the betraying. Her mind couldn't hold it. She whispered, "No," again and again, like the word could undo what she'd seen. David walked in minutes later, holding a folder, smiling faintly. He froze when he saw her. The phone was in her hand. His face drained of color, then rearranged itself into calm. "Jen," he said softly, "let's talk about this." She held the phone out like proof. "What is this?" He exhaled. "She came on to me." The sentence was too casual, too rehearsed. Jennifer's eyes filled with tears. "She's your daughter." He shook his head slowly. "She's not my daughter, and you have no idea what she's capable of." Jennifer stepped back. "You're lying." "I didn't want it," he said, voice steady. "But she wouldn't stop. She's been different for months. You've seen it. The clothes, the attitude. She wanted attention, and I made a mistake." It was the one thing Jennifer couldn't survive, the idea that the cracks in her family were her fault, that her failures as a wife had poisoned her daughter too. Her thoughts folded in on themselves. Shame became rage. Rage became something worse. David reached out as if to calm her. "Jen, you need to breathe. You don't want to do something stupid?" But she was already gone somewhere deep inside herself, back to every night she'd begged him to touch her. Every time she'd blamed herself for his distance, every fight with Brianna where she'd felt hated and old. Now it all had an answer. She looked down at the phone again, at the words she couldn't unread, and felt something break. She left the kitchen without speaking, walked to the bedroom. The world sounded far away, like it was happening underwater. She opened the closet, bent down to the safe, and entered the code by memory. The metal clicked open. Inside was David's gun. She didn't remember picking it up, just the cold weight of it in her hand. In that moment, Jennifer Mitchell wasn't thinking about murder. She was thinking about betrayal, about humiliation, about a story she had told herself for years, that love made people good, and how easily that story had been turned against her. Back in the hallway, the house was still silent. David stayed in the kitchen, hands on the counter, waiting. He didn't call the police. He didn't follow her. He just waited. Upstairs, Brianna was at her desk with her headphones on, oblivious to everything happening below. It would be another 2 hours before the neighbors heard the first shot. For now, there was only silence, a mother holding a gun, and a lie that had just become too heavy to live with. And all of it started with one unlocked phone. At 4:45 p.m., the silence inside the Mitchell house broke. But it didn't begin with shouting or chaos. It began with a single, heavy breath. Jennifer stood in the hallway holding David's gun, her body shaking but her mind frighteningly still. Downstairs, the kitchen clock ticked loud enough to fill the air. Upstairs, music leaked faintly through Brianna's door. A normal afternoon, if you didn't listen too closely. Jennifer had always thought of herself as calm, rational, a teacher, a mother, a woman who kept things steady when everyone else fell apart. But standing there, everything she'd built in her head collapsed at once. The guilt, the shame, the humiliation, it fused into something that didn't feel like rage, didn't even feel like grief. It felt like clarity. She climbed the stairs slowly. Each step sounded deliberate, like a metronome counting down. She stopped outside Brianna's door. Her reflection stared back at her from the polished doorknob, distorted, unfamiliar. Inside the room, Brianna was bent over her homework, a pencil tapping to the beat of a song only she could hear. She didn't notice the door open. Jennifer stood there, the words she wanted to say jammed behind her teeth. In her head, she wasn't thinking about pulling the trigger. She was thinking about every night she'd prayed for peace, every sacrifice she'd made, every lie she'd swallowed to keep her family together. She thought about the messages on that phone, about her husband's calm voice saying, "She came on to me." And she thought about the years she'd spent blaming herself for being unlovable. All of it rushed into the space between them. The sound that followed wasn't cinematic. It wasn't loud. It was quick, too quick to process. A thud, the scrape of a chair. Silence. Neighbors later said they didn't hear anything unusual. The house was too big, the walls too thick. Downstairs, David was standing by the counter when Jennifer appeared in the doorway, the gun still in her hand. His face went white. "What did you do?" he whispered. She didn't answer. She just stared at him. For a second, it looked like she didn't know who he was. He raised his hand slowly. "Jen, listen to me. We can fix this. Just put it down." But she wasn't listening. Not anymore. Something about his calmness pushed her over the edge. The way he still sounded in control. The way he'd always sounded in control. Her arm lifted before she even realized what she was doing. A second sound followed, then nothing. When the police arrived an hour later, the front door was unlocked. The TV was still on. A plate of uneaten food sat on the counter. Inside, they found David in the master bedroom and Brianna in hers. Jennifer was sitting on the floor at the end of the hallway, staring at the wall, the gun resting beside her. She wasn't crying. She wasn't speaking. She just kept whispering, "They betrayed me." The first officer on scene said her tone didn't match her words. It wasn't anger, it was disbelief, like someone describing a dream they couldn't wake up from. In her statement later, Jennifer said everything after seeing the phone felt like someone else was driving, that she'd looked down and the gun was just there, that she didn't remember walking up the stairs. The prosecutor would later call it a crime of passion, but anyone who'd lived a life like hers would know better. It wasn't passion, it was erosion. Years of exhaustion, insecurity, and manipulation compressed into a single impossible second. Forensic technicians cataloged the evidence with quiet precision: the phone on the counter, the gun on the floor, a house that looked like any other in the neighborhood. But there was something different about that house. Every photo on the walls showed the same three people smiling: a man, a woman, and a girl who used to rescue broken birds. The story that police would piece together over the next few days would change everything they thought they knew. Because what Jennifer saw on that phone wasn't the truth. It was the final move in a long, calculated game. The messages had been altered, the photos staged, every line of text written to protect David, not expose him. Jennifer didn't know that yet. She just sat there in the dark, convinced she'd finally stopped the pain. The truth would come later. But for now, the house was silent again. This time, it would stay that way. When the news broke, neighbors said the same thing. They seemed like such a normal family. The house was clean, the yard trimmed, the couple quiet and polite. No one ever heard them fight. No one saw the warning signs. The morning after the shooting, police tape stretched across the driveway. Reporters crowded the sidewalk, cameras clicking against the silence of the street. Inside, the investigators moved carefully, documenting everything: the phone on the counter, the gun near the hallway, the bodies in separate rooms. It didn't take long for the story to form. A mother who found out her husband was sleeping with her daughter and snapped. That was the headline. That was the version people could understand. But it wasn't the truth. The truth came out slowly, like air leaking from a tire. First came the forensics. David's phone was full of messages that appeared to show an affair, but technicians noticed something off. The metadata didn't match the timestamps. Images had been transferred from other devices, altered, renamed. Some texts had been sent from an app that allowed scheduled messages. It wasn't a secret relationship. It was a setup. Investigators pulled data from Brianna's phone next. What they found didn't fit the story either. Her messages were full of hesitation, confusion, fear. Deleted drafts that read like cries for help. "I don't know how to stop him. He said Mom wouldn't believe me. Maybe if I pretend it's fine, it'll end." Her search history was worse: articles about manipulation, consent, and how to tell if you're being groomed. It painted a picture Jennifer had never seen. The story in the headlines wasn't a forbidden affair. It was abuse hidden in plain sight. David Mitchell hadn't just lied. He'd engineered everything. The texts, the photos, even the narrative Jennifer would find. He'd known her insecurities, her fear of being unwanted, and used them as weapons. He didn't need to pull the trigger himself. He only had to make sure she did. Detectives uncovered financial records next. Every account was in David's name. Jennifer's paychecks were rerouted into a joint fund she couldn't access alone. He had control over everything: her money, her routines, even her emotions. When they found a second phone in his office drawer, the full picture came into focus. It contained audio notes, passwords, and message backups that showed deliberate manipulation of both Jennifer and Brianna over years. One investigator called it psychological imprisonment. The district attorney's office reviewed the evidence and confirmed what no one wanted to admit. Jennifer Mitchell had been as much a victim as her daughter. But by the time they understood that, it was too late. Jennifer was in a county holding cell, refusing to eat, refusing to speak, except for one phrase she repeated to her lawyer. "I was trying to protect us." When detectives showed her Brianna's diary, she broke. She read the pages until her hands shook, realizing every warning sign she'd missed, every plea she hadn't heard. Then she said quietly, "He did this. He made me hate her." In court, experts testified about coercive control and manipulation. Journalists wrote op-eds about how grooming destroys entire families. But none of it brought Brianna back. The jury didn't know where to place their sympathy. A mother who killed her daughter was still a mother who killed her daughter. The verdict was guilty of voluntary manslaughter. The sentence, 20 years. During transport, Jennifer asked one question. Did she know I loved her? The officer didn't answer. Outside, the story changed again. News anchors stopped calling it an affair and started calling it the Birdkeeper case. True crime podcasts dissected it for months, focusing on how easy it was for a predator to twist love into destruction. But for people who'd known them, it wasn't a case. It was a tragedy they couldn't stop replaying. Teachers remembered Brianna's drawings. Neighbors remembered her laugh. And Jennifer's mother, who had warned her once to be careful who she trusted, stopped answering calls from reporters altogether. In the evidence locker, Brianna's shoeboxes were still there, each labeled with a date and the name of a bird. The final one, found half-finished in her closet, was empty except for gauze and a note in her handwriting that read, "Don't give up on broken things." The detective who cataloged it said he couldn't stop thinking about that line. He said it sounded like a message for someone who would never read it. By the time the case closed, the story had changed again. It wasn't about jealousy. It wasn't even about murder. It was about how silence becomes the perfect hiding place for evil. Jennifer Mitchell never meant to kill her daughter. She meant to end her humiliation. She meant to make the pain stop. What she didn't know, what she couldn't know, was that the real monster had already been dead the moment she pulled the trigger. 2 years later, the yellow house on Maple Ridge Drive sat empty. The grass grew wild. A single window on the second floor was cracked, still taped over from the inside. The neighborhood avoided the subject. No one wanted to say the words Mitchell House out loud. It felt cursed. People crossed the street instead of walking past it. But sometimes, late at night, the porch light still flickered on. Inside a state prison 3 hours away, Jennifer Mitchell woke up at 5 a.m. every day. She taught literacy classes to other inmates, wrote letters she never sent, and spoke to no one about March 15th. The guard said she kept to herself, polite but hollow. She didn't ask for visitors. Her mother tried twice to come, but Jennifer refused both times. "Tell her I'm fine," she said, though she wasn't. In her cell, she kept a single photo taped above the bed. It wasn't of David. It wasn't even one of the family portraits people had seen on the news. It was an old Polaroid, Brianna at 8 years old, smiling proudly, holding a cardboard box with holes punched in the top. Inside it, a sparrow, the caption written in black marker, "My Bird Keeper." Sometimes Jennifer would stare at it for hours, whispering the same sentence over and over. "I should have seen it." Her therapist later said guilt had become her form of survival. It was easier than forgiving herself. The world had moved on, but the story refused to die. True crime podcasts debated whether she was a victim or a murderer. Documentaries framed her as both. The phrase, "the Birdkeeper case," became shorthand for the kind of tragedy that makes people question their own families. Every few months, new information surfaced, another journal entry from Brianna, a forgotten voicemail, a missing file from David's phone. Each one reopened the wound. One reporter tracked down Emma, Brianna's best friend, who still lived in Austin. She said she kept one of Brianna's sketches framed on her desk, a dove in flight. At the bottom corner, in faint pencil, Brianna had written, "Not everything trapped wants to be saved." When asked what she thought of Jennifer now, Emma hesitated before saying, "She wasn't a monster. She was just blind." The public wanted someone to blame. Some blamed Jennifer. Some blamed David. Some blamed the system that had missed every warning sign. But most people just wanted an ending that made sense. There wasn't one. The court had closed the case, the evidence was boxed up, but the questions never stopped. How does love turn into this? How does protection become destruction? How do you miss the truth when it's sitting across the dinner table every night? Jennifer didn't have those answers. She just knew that the story everyone told wasn't the story she lived. From her cell, she wrote one final letter to the parole board before deciding to stop speaking publicly about the case. It ended with the words, "Love can heal, but it can also rot if you don't keep it in the light." Back at the empty house, the police had returned Brianna's things to her grandmother. Most of it went into storage, except for one box, the shoe boxes from her closet. Her grandmother kept them stacked in a corner of her living room, each one labeled in Brianna's handwriting, Finch, Sparrow, Dove. The last one read simply, unfinished. The woman told a reporter she sometimes opened that final box and found a small feather inside. "I think she left it there," she said softly. "To remind us she tried to fly." That's how this story ends. Not with justice, not with closure, but with what's left behind when both are gone. A mother in a cell, a daughter in a grave, and a truth too painful for either to carry. She saved broken things, but in the end, no one saved her. And maybe that's the cruelest part of all. If you found this story powerful or thought-provoking, don't forget to like this video and share your thoughts in the comments below. Every story like this reminds us how easily silence can hide the truth. Subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss the next case we uncover. Thank you for watching.